Gems of educational innovation and leadership. Okay, so today we have a special guest, a conversation with a trailblazer who's transforming the landscape of education one charter school at a time. Imagine leading the highest performing charter school in an entire state, founding the first elementary charter school in Mississippi, and redefining what's possible for thousands of students. That's the journey of our guest, Charles R. Stanley Jr. If you've ever wondered how charter schools can achieve extraordinary results, or how educational leadership can become a pathway to true liberation, you're in for a fascinating ride. Stay tuned because today we're not just talking about education, we're talking about revolutionizing it. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Mr. Stanley. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you
Thank you
doing?
so much for having me. I'm doing extremely well. Really happy to be here, and really excited to dive into the kind of conversations that we're going to have today.
Yes, awesome. Okay, so before we get started with the questions, I have, I guess, a little bit of an icebreaker. I want you to, I guess, tell us one book that you've recently read that you think every educator should read and why.
All right. So I am currently obsessed with Ghodie Muhammad. She is she currently has her newest book that she has out is Cultivating Joy. And this book, she provides a framework for designing education with equity in mind. And this book is the second version, but this feature of joy is left out of the first version. And so the first version was called Cultivating Genius. But in this version, she talks a lot more in depth about how joy plays a huge part in education. And reading her work helped me understand why education feels so disconnecting for me so many times. And then it also helps me figure out how were the solutions I was thinking about, how do they work together in a more systematic kind of way. And when I designed schools the first time, I thought a lot about play because I was opening an elementary school. And this book really talks a lot about how do you expand that idea of play by talking about it in terms of joy and taking that across K-12 and to adults. And that's what I thought was really inspiring about that book. So I think everybody should read it.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to add her to my list. I'm a bell hooks fanatic, so it's going to be a little tough to try to get me into somebody else's bag, but I love what we've talked about before in our previous conversation. So I appreciate that that tidbit. Okay, so let's kind of talk about the beginnings of your career. Tell us about, a little bit about undergrad and just share with us what initially drew you into a career in education and then how your experience shaped your teaching philosophy.
I think I am the true definition of a nerd. And so I've loved to read due to a heavy exposure to books very early in life. I had a personal library in my room ever since I was 3 years old. And eventually I learned that you could read to teach yourself. And then the system of teaching in school made sense. So as a small child, I immediately was like, I want to be a teacher. And I was steadfast on that from the age of 7. School was also my safe place. I felt loved and cared for. And it was important that the sense of security I got from teachers, I also would give to my students. And so I experienced a lot of deeply depressed phases in my life. And what was consistent and constant for me was that I had teachers who cared and loved for me. And they were the ones who gave me lots of affirmation and support during that time period. And I was like, well, that's exactly who I need to be as a teacher. And then for the longest time, like my why for going into this work was rooted in that. Like I had teachers who loved and supported me and cared for me. And then I went to Vanderbilt for undergrad, and it was experienced in college for, as a first generation grad college attendee myself. And I almost failed my first year of college. And that was when I realized that I wasn't as prepared for college as I thought. Then my reason for the work expanded more. Like I wanted to show love and care for my kids that I would teach, but I also wanted to make sure they were adequately prepared to be able to go to a school, a PWI like Vanderbilt, and thrive and be okay.
Yeah.
Because I surely was not the entire time. And I think the K-12 space is the appropriate space to get you ready for it.
Okay, awesome. So you attended Vanderbilt. And I want to back up a little bit, because when you talked about how your educators that you experienced kind of planted a seed in you, in a sense. And I've heard people talking to other educators, I've heard people say, well, I had a teacher that didn't do it right. So it kind of was, they had that non-example that inspired them. And then I have people that I talk to like you that have good examples that inspire them. So it's always interesting when I hear, both sides, where they say, well, I had this one bad experience with a teacher and it inspired me to be a great teacher, versus like you and I have similar experiences. I had really great experiences with teachers. And that's what I lean on when I find myself like, okay, what am I going to do? Then I start thinking about, Miss Ball, Miss Buffer, Mr. Matthews, my first Black male teacher. And so I do want to kind of talk to you about that a little bit, being a Black male in education, because my first Black male teacher, even though I come from a family of teachers and I had several male like family members who were in education, my first experience with a Black male educator was my 7th grade science teacher, Mr. Matthews. And really great. There was one thing that sticks with me to this day is not putting my finger in my eye to like rub my eye. He was he was such a stickler. He was like, do not put your fingers in your eye. Do like this and rub your eye. And so every time I even attempt to put my fingers, like when I was doing my makeup this morning, and I said, oh, his voice came into my mind, like, do not do that. So it's interesting how impactful he was. So can you talk about that a little bit? Maybe if you had apprehensions or whatnot when it came to being a Black male in the education space.
I think it was actually something I leaned more into. I did not actually have any Black male educators from K to 12. My first Black male teachers were in college at Vanderbilt. And it was taking African American studies where I started meeting more of, Black men who were doing the work as well. And then I found members of my fraternity who were teaching on campus as well. And, I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and was able to find other professors who were on campus who were also a part of our fraternity, who were teaching courses that were of interest that I could gain access to. And it just heightened the importance of me doing the work. I only had 2 Black women teachers growing up, one in 5th grade, the second in 12th. Still the 2 most powerful teachers that I think of when it comes to how they related to us as students, but also pushed us and didn't accept anything less than excellence and greatness from us. And so going to Vanderbilt, where I was literally one of 2 Black men in my program, a program that only had 5 Black people in it in total, I was like, I have to go at this, and I need to figure out how to do it in the right way. Like I have an opportunity here, and I'm representing a lot in this space. Like there's not a lot of other folks who are doing this in this program but me, and so I want to make sure that I am taking the opportunity to do it right. And so I was intentional about like taking courses in African American studies about Black education to make sure that my experience at Vanderbilt, which usually would place us in mostly predominantly white school placements for student teaching, like I knew that wasn't going to be where I was going to go. So I wanted to make sure that I had access to information that was going to set me up for success to teach in urban setting schools.
Awesome. And you know what? We're going to have to come back to what you talked about as far as your placement when you did student teaching,
Oh yeah.
because that's like a major part of what I think needs to be reformed when it comes to teacher education, because where I initially learned how to be a teacher was drastically different from where I actually ended up teaching like my first real contract. And so
Right.
sometimes that if you're not prepared for that, you're like, whoa, what this is a culture shock. And depending on the type of person you are, you may or may not thrive in that type of situation. I was able to pivot
Mhm.
pretty well, but I just thought about everybody else. I'm like, oh, who else would go from being in this type of space, doing my student teaching, substitute teaching, and then going into a classroom that looks like this. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I was not prepared for this. And so I think a lot of us don't talk about that, where you might, yeah, we talk about classroom management and stuff, but that cultural piece that you may not be familiar with. And like my mom, grandma, they raised us like, act like you've been somewhere, act like you know what's going on, don't go in here acting, have some culture about yourself. That was
Yeah, yeah.
have some culture about yourself. And that it made me feel like, oh, I have no culture because I know nothing about this demographic of kids. And my first group of students was Latino. I think I had one student who was Black.
Mhm.
And I was like, whoa, but I leaned into it because I learned so much from them, and they're really a joy to teach.
Yeah.
I always say they're like my favorite group of kids. They were like they were the ones that broke me in. They were the ones that taught me all of the Mexican slang and all the Mexican cuss words. And
Right.
I'm saying I'm being very intentional about using Mexican, because when
Mhm.
I use the term Latino, and it could be, at that point, they were seventh graders, so they may or may not have like built this identity around Latinx or whatever. So I said, yeah, y'all, I can't assume y'all are Mexican. They were like, we're Mexican, Miss Hill. I was like, well, I can't just assume every student that's Latino is Mexican. I'm being all PC.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, we're Mexican. And I'm like, everybody in here is Mexican. We're having a real debate in class. And
Mhm.
they're like, yeah. And so I pointed at the most quiet student in my class, the girl who never said anything. She was still in her quiet spot when it comes to like her English learning. And I said, what about you? Are you Mexican? And then one of the other boys asked her in Spanish, and she said, and I was like, okay,
Oh,
I
okay.
just don't feel comfortable calling y'all my Mexican students, because I had to like really grow into that. It
Yeah.
was the funniest thing. They were like, no, we're Mexican. And I'm not going to try to do their accents. They had very heavy accents. We're
Yeah.
Mexican, Miss Hill. We're Mexicans. We're all of us Mexican. I said, okay. They're like, it's fine. I don't know nothing about Latinos. I said, okay, y'all are Mexican. Okay, baby.
Got
I
it.
got it, and that was a point for me to be like, and then the fact that I had one Black student in
Mhm.
that whole group, I got to see how that dynamic looked with one Black student and all, and he was kind of trying to navigate that landscape too. So that first group I had was great, but I thought about like, wow, these teacher ed programs need to really do better about preparing for different demographics. Um, so we'll have to dive into that a little bit later, because I want to talk to you a little bit about um what made you, well, let's talk about your first like teaching, like your first classroom, your first grade. Talk to us about that, and then tell us maybe about some advice that you would have given yourself that first year, knowing what you know now.
Oh, so my first year was actually pretty unorthodox. I was actually teaching in a newly created private school that was an extension of a charter school.
Okay.
So there was a Black nun in Nashville, Tennessee. Her name was Sandra Smithson. I believe she has recently passed away. but her and her sister founded the very first charters schools in Nashville, Tennessee. And had met the founder through a Vanderbilt alum who's also a soror of yours. She was a charter member for the AKA chapter on our campus. I met her at a speaking event, and she had heard about, I talked to her about my, I was like, I'm finishing my degree in education. I'm like really looking forward to getting out to the workforce. She was like, I know a perfect place that needs some help. And so she connects me with the school. And so I start there as a teacher assistant, and I meet their entire school was kind of on fire.
Oh,
I mean, it was an unsafe place to be
wow.
for kids and for adults, honestly. And there wasn't a lot of learning happening.
Wow.
And
So even structurally, I'm sorry, but
yeah.
wow. Okay.
And so when I met the founder, she was like, things have been going extremely well. And I'm really, really concerned because we have a group of 8th graders who are graduating this year, and they're about to be put in public schools. And I know that they're going to flounder and fail.
Wow.
And I want to do something about that. And so she was like, I'm going to fundraise and find money, and I'm going to start a school just for them. And I want you to help me design that. So, and at this time, she's a good 70 years old. So I just want to put this into perspective. But she's still like, she and her sister have been doing work in preschools and in education for, decades. And so she was still very much fired up about doing the work in the community, and was like, I need the help to like get this situation started. So we started a private school with 20 children from that 8th grade class. And I served as the design help. I helped design that space with her. And then I served as the math and science teacher. So I taught Algebra 1 and physical science to that group of 9th graders. And we split them by gender. So it was a very unique and niche experience for them. I graduated from Vanderbilt probably a little cocky, if you will, right? It's like Vanderbilt is the #1 education program in the country.
Right.
That's why I went. And I had been a good student. I made good grades. Teaching is just like, I got this. And then I met them. My kids very quickly humbled me, and it was just like, yeah, this is not about what you know, right? It is about how do you make knowledge make sense for us, and how do you make it relevant for us, right? Especially against all of the things that we're fighting and battling against. The school was located in North Nashville, Tennessee. So before gentrification took over Nashville, North Nashville was probably one of the most dangerous areas to exist and live in. And so students would notoriously get jumped after school for being in school uniforms and get robbed and those kinds of things. And so they would usually leave school, change clothes as they're walking home. That's kind of the environment that we're talking about. And then they have struggled historically in school. And so now they have this young, fresh out of college Black guy standing in front of them who's literally a few years removed from them, trying to drive this approach in teaching. And so it really just taught me to listen and to learn from students about what they need and how do I align that with my knowledge and expertise, and create the experience that they need. And so I really, really love that experience. But what I also didn't have was somebody teaching me. So I was like, I'm out here doing all these things, trying all this stuff. I'm a first-year teacher. Who knows if what I'm thinking is right? And I literally just have my founder who's just like, that sounds smart. And so that was something that I later realized was very much missing in my teaching experiences. I actually didn't have a lot of coaching and development as a classroom teacher because I was a strong manager. So I was able to build good relationships with kids because I listened to them and actively took their feedback and made it a part of the experience. So managing kids was never really a huge problem for me. I could do that very well. And so people just assumed that my instruction was just as good.
Wow. Okay. That's something that we could talk about for days as well. And I had to make sure that I let my new admin team know this for the next school I'm going into. I am great at my classroom management. You're gonna, I mean, I connect really well with students. I connect with parents. You're not gonna just, my kids are not gonna be just, flipping off the walls
Right.
unless they lost a piece of their mind. Like I tell you, you've lost a piece of your mind. And however, and my instruction, I think is good, but I have been in situations where, because my classroom management is on point, I feel like I'm not growing in my instruction. And I've had to tell them like, hey, I I can't just be the teacher that gets all the trouble kids, all the bad kids, because y'all don't want to see them in the office. I need somebody to pour into me, just like I'm pouring into the students, because I can't pour from an empty cup. And it took me years to get to that point where where I realized that, and I was brave enough to say something to admin in the beginning, like, hey, I cannot, continue to just take on, take on, take on. And I feel like I'm not serving these students because I'm at a 10 every day with my classroom management. I make it look easy,
Mhm.
but I should not be at a 10 every single day. It wears on me. It looks easy to you, but I'm at a 10. I don't
Yeah.
want to be at a 10 every day. I need to be like at a 3. And
Yeah.
my 10 isn't yelling and screaming. It's just that heightened sense of awareness that I always have. Like I want to chill sometimes and just
Right.
be able to focus strictly on the content, not redirecting, not,
Yeah.
I want to have that privilege. And and I was so scared to say it. I didn't always have the words to say it until I
Mhm.
talked to a former admin of mine, and she said, no. If they try to put somebody else in your class, tell them no. And I was so scared because I'm the only Black teacher
Mhm.
in this space. I'm still aware of how I'm perceived, and that's kind of the what can be really unfortunate about being the only or one of few in a space like
Mhm.
this, because I was like, oh my goodness, y'all keep putting these kids in my class. And then I look over the other teacher. I have 33 students and you only have 15. Like, whoa, hold
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
How did
Yeah.
this happen?
Yeah.
How did this happen? So I really appreciate you bringing that up about, being strong in classroom management and, managing students, but definitely, being cognizant of the fact that, hey, my instruction could use some work. And
Yeah.
sometimes, depending on the spaces that we're in, we have to focus so much on management. And I tell parents this all the time, like, most of the management piece is me telling kids how to be good humans. And I feel like, parents need to be, you're the first teacher. I need you to do the best you can, because I should only have maybe one or two that might have these different situations. They may not have anybody, like nobody. And
Mhm.
so I'm having to pour into them. I shouldn't have to pour into 90% of my students in that way. Not saying I shouldn't pour into them, but I should I shouldn't have to be, like I said, at a 10 for every single, like, and I'm like, hold on, you got a good family, you live in a nice suburb, I need, let's really be more aware of what we're teaching our kids. If you're going to put them in a public school space, I need them to be at least just ready to be a good human. Let me teach them the stuff, because I hate it when people say, oh, we just want you teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic. Well, it's hard to do that when your child is hitting people or screaming at people or slamming doors, walking out of class or not in class. Like, there's really no way for me to be able to manage that, manage my teaching, if I can't manage your child.
Yeah.
So,
And I think a lot of it, like the two things go hand in hand. Like I was a strong performer,
mhm,
but it wasn't until I became an administrator that I realized that even my strong performance wasn't strong enough.
mm,
And being a top performer, I didn't get to the place of advocacy until I got out of my comfort zone. So I started off teaching high school, and then I moved down to middle school. I taught 7th and 8th grade math, and then moved down and taught 5th grade math. And then I switched to 3rd grade, and that's where I was like,
Ooh, the 3rd grade?
I did.
Whew.
And that's where I was completely out of water. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I have to teach these kids how to read. Wait, how did I learn how to read?
Right.
I don't remember learning to read. I just remember reading. That can't be how I learned how to read. Oh boy. Now I have a class of kids who are depending on me to help them learn how to read. And the first year of teaching 3rd grade, I didn't do a great job of teaching them how to read. And it bothered me. It bothered me that my kids, and I didn't even have a large class. That was the smallest class of kids I've ever taught. I think I had a class of maybe 18.
Wow.
That year, and I did not do a significantly great job of moving them across the needle as readers. And so I felt really guilty about that. And I went to my administration and advocated and was like, somebody has to teach me how to read, teach kids how to read, because I have to get good at this. And I asked my principal to let me teach 3rd grade again, because originally they wanted me to loop up with my kids to 4th grade. And I said, I didn't do 3rd grade right, so I got to do it again. And so I did 3rd grade again, and I got more support on, learning how to teach kids how to read and make them more read with comprehension and that kind of stuff. And I got to see the growth in my kids that second year teaching 3rd grade. But then it was like, as an administrator, I was able to coach a grade level to send 100% of kids on grade level to their next grade. So 100% is the goal every time. And if I don't get there, there's like, that means there's still opportunity for me to grow and to learn, to reach the learner that I haven't reached yet. And a lot of the things with classroom management are laden in quality instruction. If kids are busy doing quality work, you are not busy doing management. They're managing themselves. And so it is that, along with like you as the adult then become the facilitator, where you are having to do some of the good human teaching work. Because where I give parents and families grace is the fact that when parents tell me my kid doesn't do this at home, I say, yeah, I agree. Because at home, there is you two, the parents, or you, the single parent, or the grandparent, or the aunt, uncle, cousins, whoever is in your house. So there's a small number of you. I guarantee you there's not 30 of you.
Right.
There's definitely not 30 of your child at the same age in the same space at the same time. So the lessons that you teach them are applied differently at home than they are at school. And so it is actually incumbent upon us at school to show students, what is it like to be in a setting of this sort with 30 people who are around your age, who are different from you, and how do you engage with them appropriately? And then now that sounds different to how I help the parent have the conversation with their kid, because no, this isn't something you're actually going to practice at home, but this is something that I expect from you as your parent at home to do while you're there at school as a representation of us. And that is a shifting conversation that gets a lot more parent buy-in and investment to like, oh, I see how my child's behavior is impacting the whole and how I can play a part in that.
I love that. And thank you so much for being vulnerable and telling us about, that 3rd grade experience that you had. Because I went down to 5th grade and I said, I would never do it again. I don't have enough growth. God is still working on me. I did not say, give them to me again. I said, no, don't put me back down there. However, I am teaching them this next year because they'll be in 7th grade. Yeah. So they're excited about that. I said, ooh, child, I got to walk y'all to the library. No, not I, said the cat. That's what I said. But I really appreciate you talking about, that vulnerability that you had and how brave you were to tell your admin, hey, somebody needs to show me how to do this. I know that some teachers feel like, well, I got to fake it till I make it because, admin's busy. That's their job. They have to provide you with that professional development. And just because we went through an education program does not mean that I know every single thing about teaching and instruction and management. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, as a teacher, you are a forever learner. You have to be. We don't, oh, you're off in the summers. No, I'm not. I've been reading so much, and like people, I'm like, no, we're not off in the summer. And we
Yeah,
only get paid in the summer because they're taking money out of our other checks throughout the year.
correct. It's right across
So,
the quill.
right, right. I'm a 10-month employee, and so I really appreciate you sharing that with us, and saying, hey, somebody needs to teach me how to teach these kids how to read, instead of, opting out maybe and saying,
Mhm.
what, let me just go here, because I know that's what I did, child. I was like, I need to be back in the middle school. I like the madness in the middle, the
Yeah,
fifth
yeah, yeah.
grade. But I did love, like, there were some things about elementary that I will always treasure. And some things that I've realized, I'm like, oh, I think that one, I love how they were so eager to learn,
Mhm.
and they wanted to show me everything. Now that was annoying because as a mom, I get tired of, like, look at this, look at this, look at, but that's just part of being a parent. But when you're an elementary teacher, they are still like that. And so they
Mhm.
wanted to show me everything they were learning. And at first I was like, oh, I don't have time to look at everything. What are you trying to show me? Okay, does that have anything to do with our lesson? And I had to they wore me down throughout the school year. And eventually I was so excited about everything they were showing me. Oh, this? Well, let me tell you what. And certain things that I taught them, like they had never heard about, like Katrina.
Mhm.
We came across it in our social studies lesson, and we were reading a story, and it was basically like a nonfiction tale. So um we're reading it, and there was a mention of Katrina, and they didn't catch it because they didn't
Mhm.
really have the background knowledge. And I said, how many of y'all know about Katrina? And none of them raised their hands. So I gave them a little lesson, and I told them what I experienced. I said, look,
Mhm.
I was in college when this happened, and this is what I remember. And after that, I started having kids. Can we check out a book about hurricanes? Can we, and I said, oh, I really like that. So, and they really like hung on every word. Those are some of the best teacher appreciation gifts I got was in elementary school. I said, oh, these parents are still involved. They love these. I said, gift cards. Oh, galore. Thank you.
Yeah,
Because
I'm
at
not gonna
middle,
lie. The best gift givers are the elementary kids. They
yes,
are.
they are.
Their parents are so grateful. They're so appreciative. And
They
yeah,
are.
my
Yes.
gifts as an elementary teacher and as a school principal were top tier because of that.
Yes. I said, you know what? Don't stop that, parents. Don't stop that gift giving, because they are highly appreciated. When I said, oh, that was one of the things that made me think, like, okay, do I need to rethink staying in fifth grade? Because I kind of like this. When I got a
Right.
gift card, and the amount, it was 3 digits on the amount.
Same. Yeah, yeah.
I was like, hold on, did she give me the wrong one? Is this meant for one of the kids for Christmas gift? Like, did I?
I
No,
didn't
no,
second
no.
guess mine. I was like, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I worked hard. I worked hard.
right.
I
I
earned that gift
deserve.
card.
I
I earned that gift card.
deserve. Like Tank, I deserve
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
And yes, I think about that. I'm like, oh, and but I tell people what I learned about middle school, because I used to gripe like, man, these peers are not involved, but they're more like spread out, because by middle school the kids are in athletics and all that other stuff. So parents are probably doing other stuff, and they're not like, they can't just come to the school and bring you Route 44 Sonic drink. Like
Yeah.
the PTA isn't as strong in middle school, but elementary, whoo, that's one thing. I'm like, I might have to moonlight in elementary
Okay, a little
this
bit.
year.
Just a little bit. Mhm.
But yeah, again, I appreciate you being vulnerable and saying, hey, you needed that help. And I think more of us as teachers need to be open and vulnerable like that, and let people know, like, hey, I'm not really good at this, and I need some help, and identify those that are good at it, because we have those rock star teachers that um might not be. I've been around some teachers that are not the flashy, they're not the loud ones, but they are so intentional about their instruction, or they're very intentional about their their lesson planning, and they have these ideas, and I'm like, I met somebody that's really good at
Mhm.
reading, at teaching reading, and she seemed so shy. She's like, well, you have to do this and do. I'm like, you are amazing. You need to be doing a presentation. She's like, no, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, okay, well, teach me thy ways, because I recognize greatness and I need some of that. So
Yeah.
um
I mean, it
we
goes
have to
to
be open.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to the point that you were making earlier, where I mean, the greatest gap that we have to make sure that we are working to overcome as Black educators is not being pigeonholed into cultural roles, because they are not pathways to school leadership. So I knew that I wanted to become a principal at some point, and I couldn't just be a good classroom manager to get there. I had to know
Mhm.
instruction. I had to be an actual academic performer, because that was the way it was talked about in terms of who was getting principalships in the schools that I was in. It was the people who were high performers academically. So
Mhm.
my class may come in, they silent, but if they all can't read, it's irrelevant. And so that's why it was so important for me to want to do it over again. Was for that. It was like I needed to show that like I'm not just a person who can control Black bodies and brown bodies.
Mhm.
I can educate students, and they can leave and retain the knowledge that they are given in the course of a year and over time. And I can show other people how to do that. And so those were like the things that I knew needed to be true in order for me to
Yeah.
become a principal. And I see so much of that now, sitting as from my seat, where I'm like, yeah, I see Black men all the time, assistant principals of culture, deans of culture, like, and it's like, where we are not going to close this gap with Black educators if we're not also actually doing the instructional work and showing the instructional prowess too. So it
Mhm.
was imperative for me to be a beast.
Yes, and I appreciate that so much, because, and it's not to say that Black educators aren't good at
Yeah.
instruction. It's just that, like you said, a lot of times we're pigeonholed into, and I love the term you use. What is it? Culture. What was the term you used?
Oh, I don't even remember.
It was we're pigeonholed into this like cultural mascots, or
Mm,
or whatnot. And like you said, I'm just not good at controlling Black bodies or just children's bodies. Like that's not all I'm good at. And I know I can be good at instruction because I've seen it myself. However, like you said, we have to make sure we know how to market that, which is it's like, oh, crap. I hate that I have to use that word as a teacher. I
mhm,
have to be able to market these other skills of mine, because yeah, like, just because my class is quiet and they're all sitting down and they're not talking back and all that doesn't mean they're learning anything. These but and I was one of those kids that was talkative. As you can see, I'm still talkative, but I was that one that when we had the grades in conduct, I was the one that had the D, needs improvement, classroom distraction, all that. I was that person. I was that kid. And something that my parents, and of course my parents came through Jim Crow,
mhm,
they're telling me like, if you can't do anything else in that class, you can sit down and shut up. That's what
mhm,
daddy told me. And so I'm like, oh, well, I'm trying to, but I have all these friends and I want to talk to them. I don't want to share all my ideas. And I have all, and it took a teacher in 8th grade that said, you are smart, but your conduct is putting like a dark cloud over your intelligence. And she said it in a different way. She said, look, you
mhm,
can't be pretty and stupid, you know.
mhm.
And I didn't like, because I used to read the dictionary and learn new words just so I could, put a
Use
like
them.
yeah, use them, and then people don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm like, I know more than you. That was my thing.
Yeah.
And when she said that, I was like, it kind of did something to me. I don't know if nowadays, I don't know if you could say that to a student without it kind of pushing them down, because in me, it made me kind of sit up straight because I didn't want to disappoint her. And she said, look, I don't care what kind of grades you're making. All I think about is how you disrupt my class and disrespect me.
Mhm,
So, and I never saw me talking or being talkative as disrespect, because I wasn't
mhm,
talking back to her. I wasn't walking out the classroom. I wasn't skipping class. I did what I was supposed to do. I didn't
Woo.
break dress code. But I'm
You're
just
gonna need to start another podcast. My response to this story.
yeah. See, now and I just didn't see it as disrespect. She said, "You're disrespectful to me," and I said,
Yeah,
"Well,
the Jim Crow era did a time,
yes."
and so did the integration of schools. Because what
Mhm,
what I find disheartening about that experience is that it was attempting to kill a part of you. And it's a
mhm,
part of you that actually exists in so many of us, is how so many of our kids are labeled as ADHD. When
mhm,
historically, the way that we learn best as a people is through movement, is through
mm.
discourse, it's through
Yes.
discussion, it's through application, right? So if in the history of a part of my getting into design work, and I know we'll eventually get to that part of my story too, but a part of that journey was about like really unpacking the ways that we've had to assimilate into white dominant culture in order to thrive in educational spaces. Um, and for the longest time, that was my charge. I took that as my charge as a teacher. You heard me say that earlier. It's like that was how I was leading. And I never kind of gave a preface as to whether that was a good thing or not. But I am about to
Mm,
now. I actually think it was very damaging. I came in
mm,
feeling like I needed to prepare students to assimilate into white spaces. And to me,
mm,
that was just perpetuating white supremacy. And so I
mm,
had to undo that and unlearn that as a thinking. And it was really more of like getting to the space of schools have for decades now shown that they are not quality spaces for Black and Brown students to thrive academically. We're
mm.
always the lowest performing. We're always at like the margins of those of the data is always pointing our direction, which says the design isn't working. And
Mm,
instead, it is pointing the fingers and giving us labels and putting us in spots and conditions and medications. When in reality, it is maybe we should think about what does it mean to school Black and Brown children and have that rooted in their culture and the history of how they've learned as a people.
yeah.
And how does that create a different experience for Black children to thrive? And that's ultimately what my work in Mississippi was all about, was like
Mm.
testing out that as a theory.
Wow. Okay. Perfect caveat. Perfect caveat. So now let's okay, so I guess how should I ask this? Okay, so what um motivated you to start the first elementary charter school in Mississippi? So kind of tell us that story and guide us through that.
Okay. So prior to Mississippi, I was an assistant principal for Success Academies charter schools in the South Bronx. Now, I wouldn't normally name a specific organization on a show like this, but I want to specifically because they are well known and the context of their school just matters a lot. Um, they are one of the highest performing charter school networks in the country. I mean, talking top 1% in both math and literacy rates. I mean,
Awesome.
I literally am looking at schools that have 100% pass rates on exams. Like it's a beauty to behold in some ways. And what they also do is provide great development for leaders. So I was able to coach the grades I managed very well because they were showing me what is great coaching and how do you execute that. So I would take the learning, make it my own, go in my schools and run it.
Mm,
And what happened was that my schools were constantly in the top 10 out of 24 schools. And so I got kind of found in a little early because I had only been with the organization probably 4 months before I was asked to submit an application for school leader.
mm,
Because they could see it was like you're always super engaged in PD, like you're going back to your school, you're executing, and you're getting great results right out of the bat.
mm,
And we're hearing great things. Like we want to see what you have to offer as terms of being a school leader with us.
mhm.
So I went through that process and was kind of in line to take over the school that I was working at. Then a recruiter reached out. Well, let me get back up before that. The CEO of the organization called a fireside chat with all of the assistant principals.
Mm,
And basically, she was talking about how she didn't want to expand her work outside of New York. She wanted to open 100 schools in New York. At the time, she'd only had 52 open, I think. So she was like halfway there. Or 54, I think was the number. And she was only halfway there. And she was like, I have no intention of taking this program anywhere else until I at least finish this mission here. And she
okay.
was like, nothing that I'm doing is trademarked or patent secret. saw research that has existed. So you can feel free to take that wherever you like. If you want to go elsewhere outside of New York, feel free. So she said that, I was like, oh, that's kind of empowering. Not something I
Yes.
would expect. And I didn't think much of it until I got an email from a recruiter. And the recruiter was from the schools down in Mississippi and in Nashville. So there was a charter network that had schools in both regions. They were looking for someone to be the principal of their elementary school. Now, I was a New Yorker then, and I love New York. It is my favorite place, hands down. So I had no intentions of moving to Mississippi. That was not on my radar. And I'm an openly Black gay man too. So it's just like, Mississippi doesn't seem like the smart decision here. And that's also what my family and friends were thinking once I actually shared that I was interested in doing this opportunity. Right. What interested me in the opportunity was that it was the opportunity to design a school. And when I was younger, and very early in my career, before I'd even started teaching, there was a superintendent that got appointed in New Orleans who was 27, was a Black man. And I was like, so I want to do something like that. I want to do something really great, really young. And I had gotten in college, I learned about boarding schools, the Black boarding schools that used to exist in the country as well. And that now there are only 4 in operation now. And I wanted to open a boarding school too. I was like, I want to be the 5th. I want to start this back up. And so when this opportunity to found this elementary school came up, I was like, is this all the things, all this makes sense. This is the work that I want to do. And then it became like, okay, Mississippi. At that time, Mississippi was last in the nation, in the country for its ranking in education. Jackson, Mississippi was the poorest capital city in the country as well. And there had not been a large charter movement there. And so what became appealing was the opportunity to, one, make history. And I think being a part of my fraternity, I think it's always like opportunities to make history and be first. We are going to go for it every time.
Every time.
That, and I was like, if I can do this in these conditions and be successful here, I can literally do this work anywhere. And so I really wanted to go and prove that to myself, that like the model that I had done, the work that I had done in the South Bronx was replicable, it was solid, and it was affordable. And if those 3 things were true in the Bronx, could they also be true in Jackson? And I wanted to test that theory amongst a few other theories that I had been developing about, like, what is the experience that we should be having in order to thrive and be successful and feel safe? And yeah, I took a visit down to Jackson and had a conversation with one of, she wasn't a board member at the time. I think she was being approached about becoming one, but she was a parent. And she was talking to me about the opportunities and the difficulties as a privileged Black woman to find educational opportunities for her children. And she was like, if I have money and I'm struggling, imagine. And I was like, that hit me. And I was like, enough said. That was all I need to hear. I moved in 2017 and designed the school in 6 months and opened in August of 2018.
Awesome. So, okay. When you were talking about affordability, well, no, I'm going to get to that later. I'll get to that later because I feel like that's a separate conversation, like we talked about earlier. I'm taking my notes because we will have to have another discussion about some things that are coming up in my mind. But I'm like, I got to stay within my little outline. I got my type A personality is really getting to me right now. Okay, so could you tell us what? In your view, what unique value do charter schools bring to the educational landscape? Because they're getting a lot of flack. You hear about it a lot, like, oh, they're taking money from traditional public schools. They're doing this, so can you tell us some of the good and the value that they can bring to what we have now?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a question I want to answer very intentionally. And I really only hold kind of two views about this now. One is that charter schools were originally designed in theory to find and share solutions with struggling school districts to help them improve. In
Okay.
the ideal world, the charter absolves and morphs into the school district, and the school district runs the revised play.
Mm.
That pretty much never happens. Okay. But that is a view that I do feel like is a value add of a charter. But
Mm.
again, I've not seen it in practice. And then the second is for aspiring Black educational entrepreneurs, charter schools provide financial access to those seeking to start schools without access to significant amounts of capital.
Mm.
Um, and I think those two reasons are why I personally find value in charter schools. However, charter schools have done a significant amount of harm because of who's behind those designs. And the criteria for opening a charter doesn't require that leader to be an educator themselves. And
Yeah.
over the course of the last 3 or more decades, at least 3 decades, we saw a lot of non-educator business people launching schools, and that has led to varied experiences across the country that have been mostly negative. But here's what we're also battling, and there are 3 hard truths that we have to wrestle with. One, there is an active attempt to destroy public schools, right?
Mm.
You can't even negate it at this point. We're seeing it through like the vouchering system. We're seeing it in the ways that for-profit charters started the work, and then nonprofit charters kind of came behind and kind of also had rocky roads as well. And what has shifted is that, Black and brown students are now the largest market share users of public schools. And so there's been divestment in public schools since integration. That is a cause for concern. And so we should always be concerned about money that is leaving public schools. And that's a fact.
Mm.
The second thing is that public schools of today were not designed with us in mind, right?
Mm.
And so, as I said before, a lot of the bad data that schools have are on the backs of Black and brown students.
Mm-hmm.
We are the ones who usually have the poor results. And then what happens is more finger pointing at conditions and circumstances, as those conditions and circumstances aren't a part of the affluent world too. I taught in the
Mm.
affluent school district as well. And so while my family may not have been poor in money, the mental and psychological circumstances that my children were facing were no different than
The
the students
same.
that I had without. So I think that that's something to think about as well. And then the third thing is that like public schools are failing, and the redesign work is imperative. And so
Mhm.
I think that heightens the need for the resurgence of Black schools and Black school leaders. And so I see Black charter operators as potential actors of resistance, as Black schools have been in the past. And so,
Mm.
the example that sticks out the clearest to me, and there are countless, and Goli Muhammad actually alludes to some of these in her work too. But the story about the school leader who founded the boat school in Louisiana,
Yes.
right? That was an act of resistance where we were not allowed to be in those schools and receive education. It was like, okay, we can't do this on the land. Boom, we'll take it out to the water. You didn't make a rule about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so while I've seen so much of the harm that charters have been able to do, I think when there are Black educators who are doing the research, doing the work around how do we create liberatory style schools for us, I say we absolutely should be the ones going out for charters, getting the money so that we're not out here trying to fundraise and write grants. And like, think about like that level of hurdle doing that as a Black person is already there too. So this is actually a pathway that is a bit more streamlined to get through, though there is a lot of bureaucracy and red tape to also navigate. But getting green lit to do that, like there's so many Black independent charter operators now that did not exist before, and a lot of those came after the pandemic too. So I
Mm.
think this is the kind of work that if we are trying to stay in education, this is probably the most likely pathway to do it.
Okay, I love that. Okay, so can you kind of give us because I'm thinking, okay, if I'm interested in trying to start a charter school,
Mhm.
right? Who are some of the key people or stakeholders that I need in my corner, like to just get it off the ground? Because you can't do everything like as a one superhuman person. So you
Mhm.
need a good, I'm all about having a good team. So I know I don't know everything. I'm good
Yeah,
at organizing people, but I know like when it comes to detailed information, I need those people with the detailed knowledge. So what are like give us some of the key people that one needs in their corner to
yeah.
get a successful charter school started?
I mean, like you said, I think there's two pathways that you can take. One is like finding fellowships that are sponsoring school startups, and a lot of those, so programs like a BES, the Mind Trust, the Opportunity Trust, those are different fellowships that exist that are about incubating schools. And so lots of school incubators exist out there who also tend to provide a portion of funding to support the work as well. And so my first diffusion advice is look at those, see which applications resonate with who you are as a person, and like go out for those opportunities, because they will also position you and put you in places to meet and connect with people as well. But I think there are two types of groups of folks that you need. One is educators, right? So you need people that you trust and know who are aligned philosophically in the work that you are trying to do, who can be thought partners in the work alongside with you.
Mm-hmm.
That could be whoever you want that to be, depending on what kind of school you're trying to create. Now, the other side is your other type of network, which is all your other friends, right? Is the people that you went to college with, the accountants, the real estate people,
Mm.
right? You want, so it's like, yeah, real estate, finance, marketing, communications,
Okay.
um,
Everything that a business needs, basically.
pretty much. Yeah.
Okay,
So you
gotcha.
think about, and the way I named it like that is because in essence, you're looking for people who would make up a board. And a
Mm,
board is the representative of all those like business aspects, and they have all these connections outside that help you as a leader like run the entire play.
mhm,
And so before you get to officially selecting board members, you can use your own network of people to get ask questions about like how do I go about searching commercial real estate to find
mm,
opportunities for what a school site would be, or how would I even afford one of those, and like what does that look like?
mhm,
Another value add to doing a charter is that because you would be a state you'd be a state function sanctioned organization or a school. Lenders give you more grace, right? They know that you're going to get, once the kids in the building, they're going to get their money, so they're willing to give you the time, the loan up front,
yeah,
right, to build,
mhm,
help you get the facility started, and be like, okay, you can just give us the money. So it's like little
mhm.
nuances.
Okay, awesome. So that's, I've got some people out there that I'm going to make sure they heard that message. Okay, so I'm going to pivot into my next segment that's going to just talk about your leadership and school management. So could you describe your leadership style, and then how you balance the needs of like your demands at your role now, and your actual leadership style, like how you balance all that?
um, this question is always so funny to me because I feel like I never have the right like kind of response to this. So I've like made up my own version of responding to this question that is uniquely me. So I have philosophies instead, I think, that guide my work. I have seven. The
Okay.
first. Once you hear these, you'll see how they align to like what you asked me.
I like that it's
One,
7 too. It's
yeah,
interesting.
and of course, right? One is don't evaluate what you don't teach.
Oh.
Two, strengthen weaknesses. Three, be you, everyone else is taken.
Mm,
Four, growth is a non-negotiable. Five, clear is kind and direct is the only path.
mm.
Six, men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie. Everything is rooted in data. And then seven, your results are a reflection of our dynamic and you being willing to do this together.
Awesome. You know what? That's going on a poster behind my desk. Consider it stolen, and I'm
You,
gonna ruminate on that. Awesome. Well, thank you. So, tell us how maybe how you are as a leader in a school. Like what
Yeah.
would you be known as? Like if I were to come up to some of the teachers where you were a leader, and I say, "Hey, how's Mr. Stanley? Like describe how he is as a leader in the school." What would they say?
I have, this is not on my list of philosophies, but it is a belief that I have that the school leader should be one of the most expert teachers in the building.
Mm,
And that school leader then shares that expertise through professional development, one-on-ones, classroom walkthroughs. And so when I started as a school leader, I made it very clear to my team that it's like, I'm not coming in your rooms to evaluate you. I actually don't really believe in teacher evaluation systems, but I'm not supposed to say that out loud. And the reason I don't believe in it is because the principal is the instructional guardian of the school. And if that is my job, then the results that happen within the school are my responsibility. So a teacher, the weakest teacher that I have in the building is a reflection of my ability to teach them to be a stronger teacher.
mm,
And so what they would say is that you're going to see that Mr. Stanley is in our classrooms. He knows our kids. He has no problem jumping in, giving any helpful feedback. He knows what he's doing and what he's talking about. And with Mr. Stanley comes in and he gives me pointers and advice about my lesson, it's going to help me get better outcomes for kids. And that being my reputation was very helpful, especially after pivoting. My first year was very hard because I had to sell people into a school design that was very different than what they had ever done before. I was asking them to teach in a way they never taught before, in a way they had not been taught themselves. And I needed them to lean into that. But in order for them to do it, they had to experience it. And so I run my schools like teaching hospitals. I feel like, so, for doctors, they go through years of time where there's someone who is there guiding them and giving them pointers and feedback on how to do the work and fine tune their craft. And that's how I run school. And I do that with leaders. I do that with teachers alike. And it is about like, yeah, how do we make this work for you? How do you learn best? How do we differentiate this so that you get it? How do I learn about you and build connections so that I can differentiate appropriately? Because that's exactly what I'm asking you to do for kids. I'm asking you to get to know them, learn them, how they learn best, and adjust. And when you all as adults don't have that, that's what I'm also doing so that you can be at your best.
Okay, I love that. And so I want to ask your opinion on this. It was like a small debate that myself and some people on a former team that I was on, where an administrator, well, this wasn't an administrator at our school, but we had like how they bring people in like a TED talk for our PD sessions. And it's somebody, I'm just like, how much money do we spend on this person? Whatever. There's nobody in our district that can make us feel good like this person that we didn't have to spend money on. Anyway, that's above me, I guess. So the speaker made this comment that basic teaching is teaching. His argument was that, Mr. Matthews, his argument
even I
was, see how I thought about that? Well, his argument was that no matter like what your content background is, you should be able to teach what we tell you to teach. And so there were some teachers that were like, well, some administrators that I heard saying, well, I'm the math and science principal, or I'm the reading principal. And if, let's just say, a teacher that's an ELA teacher has a question about delivering instruction, if you're considered the math and science principal, you kind of defer to the English principal. I'm kind of in the middle of this back and forth. Like, teachers are like, well, no, because some of us are only good at this or that. I kind of struggled with that philosophy in my head, and so I want to get your take on it when it comes to administrators and coaching their teachers in their building, because I understand kind of being a content expert, but when that particular speaker said, well, he said, teaching is teaching. what do you feel about that take? And like, what is it? Because I still struggle with, well, I can't just think of, if I were an administrator, I'm thinking I can't just think about, well, I'm only good at teaching this particular content area. Um, let's defer to this other principal. But it can also be like a political thing. Like, if that's their job, maybe I should defer to them. So kind of give me your take on that.
So I'm more aligned with the speaker, but I think there was a bit more context that probably should have been laid there to make it make more sense. I think it is perfectly right and normal for an assistant principal and a teacher to have content areas of expertise, and to be specialized. That is important. But a school leader has to be well versed in a variety of things. And so I'm a math teacher by trade, but I ran elementary schools, which means I have to know how to teach kids how to read.
Yeah,
I have to be good at teaching and reading instruction. And if my teachers aren't good at reading instruction, who is going to make them better at it? Whose job is it? It's mine. So principal development and principal growth at this stage means you are looking at, if I came into this work knowing that math was my forte. So I leaned into English the most of the time that I've been an administrator, because I needed to know what it looked like to do that well as well. Because math I already got. I can do math in my sleep. I can get up and step into somebody's classroom today and be like, okay, you're teaching what? Okay, got it. Here's what I would recommend. For literacy, I'm gonna need some more time. But like, it doesn't mean that I opt out of it. And me having a voice in that also doesn't take away from my assistant principals as well. So as a school leader, my expectation really is that my APs are the true like drivers of the coaching work, because they are specialized, right? They're either by grade level or they're by a content area, and that is on purpose, because the way you approach the work is you are doing a deep dive into lessons and studying the content before you step foot into a teacher's classroom to give them guidance about the lesson they're executing, right? There's a level of studying that comes with that like, as a school leader, I'm not about to study kindergarten through fifth grade or fifth grade through eighth grade or ninth grade through 12th. I mean, I'm in high schools right now. We offer at least 36 different courses. So I'm not going to claim to be an expert in all of those. However, what I can do as a school manager and as a former school leader is help people navigate instruction within all content areas, regardless of what you're teaching, because teaching is in fact teaching. And there are certain things that are tried and true that I can give you the feedback, and your application is to then say, oh, well, in the math world, this will look like this, or in the science world, this is how I would apply that feedback, or in an English lesson, this is how I would apply that feedback. The feedback is still right. It just needs context, and that's where you're the expert. And so a lot of this is also allowing teachers to be the expert. Like, just because I give you a piece of feedback doesn't mean the feedback is the total package. It's literally just it's kind of like the teaser in to like figuring out what is the real thing that we need to solve for. And figuring that out is a combination of like you giving me the context of what you're experiencing and what you know. I'm giving you the context of what I'm experiencing and how that sits against the goals that we're trying to reach. And when we bring those things together, it allows us to come up with creative solutions that we can work on together. It's not about what you're going to do. It's also about what I'm going to do, because it's like that means I might need to shift how I'm leading PD, and how I'm doing your one-on-one check-in, or or how I'm pulling a small group of you together to do work. Like that's how it all kind of works together.
Awesome. Okay, so I have another question about some of the work that you've done. And you've had success in reducing chronic absenteeism.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about that and the approaches that you took to make sure that you were successful in that area?
Yeah. So I've done chronic absenteeism work in two different settings. I did the work during the pandemic, when I was managing schools there in Mississippi. So after I founded my school, I took over managing that school plus two middle schools. And when the pandemic happened, we shifted to virtual learning, like pretty much everyone else did. But Mississippi was pretty late in the game. But Mississippi also struggled with the data deserts that exist. And so you could see the true impacts of poverty during COVID for certain. And my organization did, we went out and we used our the money, federal dollars, to do hotspots, personal hotspots for families, make sure everybody had laptops so they had access to school. That was really important. It was like making sure the access wasn't a problem. And then it was about relationship building. And I think doing chronic absenteeism work during the pandemic time was very different than doing the work now. And I think during the time then, it was very much of like, we were operating kind of like relief efforts were in the city, right? So I felt like we were driving food to homes using our school buses so that our bus drivers stayed employed. Like, we were doing creative things to try to keep things afloat so that people could survive. And I felt like that level of work got us. Our absenteeism was low because people saw how much we were pouring into them. And so that level of love and care, I believe, was a huge part of why we didn't struggle as bad with attendance. But we also created a system for how we would reach out to families and connect with them when they were missing, and emphasize, them being at school, create plans with them and problem solve and troubleshoot with them on how to do that. I mean, there's nothing really rocket scientist about doing chronic absenteeism work. I feel like everybody really is doing about the same play. I think what's really important here is the follow through with how you progress your escalation up in terms of where you support and document. And then how regularly you are checking in and pouring in with folks, and then providing them additionally with a space they want to come to. So I think that's what's different now about doing chronic absenteeism work is pandemic's not technically over, but we're over mentally. And so doing the work in high schools, chronic absenteeism at the high school level right now is in the upper 70s and 80s across the country. And my schools were no exemption to that. One of my schools was at 71% had 71% chronically absent students the prior year when I stepped into the role. And we created both incentives and consequences for around attendance to re-heighten this awareness. Before, students they could miss as many days as they wanted, and they still would get promoted to the next grade. That was a condition. During the pandemic, we lowered expectations. And so the pandemic being over, we need to raise them. And so I then instituted a cap of 28 days. At 28 days, you lose all your credits. So we told that ahead of time. And then what we also were doing with schools is I found our schools to be boring. And it's if I find them to be boring, they do. So that's a problem that we have to also figure out. That's why the Cultivating Joy book is a good conversation piece. We're still working on that. And it's about school has to be an enjoyable place in order to motivate kids to come. And I had really strong attendance in Mississippi, and that was the reason. It's my school, a part of my school design was play. We had a blocks room that was literally a room with wooden blocks that kids in kindergarten and first grade would go to for a block of time just to play. On top of having mandatory recess, we had a mandatory structured recess where we would do whole class games so that everybody would get to participate and engage and have fun together and build community and learn how to work together. Build the muscle for them to do recess without structure. Because if you think about how chaotic recess is typically, and it's because we haven't provided a space for kids to learn how to do recess right. So I was no, we're going to teach recess like we do any other class. So we're going to do recess together. We're going to learn the norms and expectations of recess together. We're going to play together. And then when you all become second and third graders, y'all know how to do recess already. You've been doing it since you're 8. You all know how to go out and be collaborative and work together and play together, and resolve conflict, right? So it is thinking about how do we embed fun and joy at all levels of school that motivate kids to want to come to school. And so we created incentives, and it was yo, these are high schoolers and they motivate just like we do as adults. We know if we know up front what we're getting and we like where we're going to get it, we're going to do what we need to do to get what we want to get.
Yes.
These are humans like everyone else. Kids, they're just small humans. They operate the same way. So we started naming what we wanted to be true for our kids at the top of the quarter and telling them what they would get if they did it. And so there were things like being able to order food for lunch off of DoorDash because we did not allow that, but it became an incentive for having strong attendance for the week. So if you were at school, if you had perfect attendance for the week, then Friday, boom, run your DoorDash order. It's cool, right? And so it is about like thinking about what are the things that really connect with kids, giving them incentives, but also being very clear about where your non-negotiables are. And like at the end of the year, families got notifications and they received notifications throughout the year, letting them know that your kid is approaching danger. Your kid's approaching danger. In 28 days, your kid will lose credit. And so like that language was in front of them frequent times. So when it came, and we had an appeal process, so that folks felt like there were circumstances that were extenuating that they needed to fight, they would come. I had 5 appeals.
Wow. Okay, I like that. When you said something about DoorDash, I'm like, okay, because that has been a pain point in this area where I teach. I mean, we've had parents almost picketing, and I'm like, okay, how y'all got time to do all this? And but anyway, but when it came to like students ordering, because it became like a distraction during the week because they're ordering stuff first period or they're like leaving class to go to the bathroom to do orders or and so people a lot of times I think parents didn't understand like we have students that are opting out of instruction to order food.
Right. And so if you just change it to be like, if they do these things, then we can do it in this structured time. Like, I mean, I'm also a little type A. I like control. That's probably why I became a teacher too. It's like I'm a little controlling. But like as I've been learning, like what does it look like to provide liberated education? It's learning about like how do I relinquish this notion that I am supposed to be controlling kids' bodies and persons. I'm not. What I am supposed to do is inspire them and motivate them. And while that sounds very pie in the sky, when you truly look at if you truly look at the ways that like merge what you're looking for and the things that kids are seeking and blend those together, you can get the things that you desire without compromising. Like I was a stickler about attendance. I want people in my school building on time every day. 7:45 was my open door time. At 7:45:01, I personally, the principal, was closing the front door and was standing at the front waiting as parents were coming in. And so they would see me very upfront. It's like, hey, Mrs. Stanley, hey, it's 7:45. It's 7:46. What happened today? Right. And so it's like, wait, he's really going to ask and follow up on those things. Yeah. Adult accountability is one that I do believe in, but I don't believe that you have to demean and talk to people crazy to get adults to function either. And what I was really clear about as a school leader was like, I make my expectations very known and clear. And I would send out weekly newsletters to families. And it would literally be things that I knew I was focusing on that I also wanted them to focus on. And there were times I gave plenty of challenges around attendance because I was a stickler. I wanted to average my end of school year with 98%.
Yeah.
And I knew the math that it would take to get there. And so I shared that with them. And I was like, this is the total amount of kids who can be out of my school building at any given day. Any more than this is going to be a problem. And so we got to talk about like, how do we schedule visits? And so I worked a lot with parents around like understanding the things that they were navigating and how do I help them still meet the expectation. So yeah, I had parents who were working multiple jobs and I'm still giving homework, right? Well, where is the middle ground in that so that parents who are working those 2 jobs see homework as not a burden, but as something beneficial that they can get done despite them working 2 jobs. And that's where we started working together and getting really creative. So that would look like if your child care centers in the city of Jackson started converting to our homework packets because they were serving our kids. And I was like, well, if you're going to have our kids and their parents are entrusting them with you, then you should understand how our homework works so that you can help them. And so that the parent can just check that as complete when they get home from work. Now my homework is done. The parent didn't have to extend themselves extra crazy. Their caregiver was given the support to do the work themselves. Everybody's happy.
Right. I now want to ask you about that. That has brought up a whole new question for me because there's been a different philosophy on homework at every school that I've taught. So could you talk about that? Because I've been it and I do understand that, you have to support your demographic because you have to know your demographic and be able to support that. So can you talk about your philosophy on homework?
Yeah, I have been fighting on this. Like, I've been very anti-homework actually for a lot of my career.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until my work in the South Bronx where I actually got to see homework done in a different way that made me say, actually, I can be down with homework and I can help other folks get down with it too. So much so that I would give homework over the breaks.
Okay.
And it would get done. So, and I'm still testing this out because I haven't gotten to test this completely in middle schools and high schools yet.
Mm-hmm.
And my philosophy around it, once it gets to older kids, also shifts. But I think in elementary school, particularly, homework should be fluency work exclusively.
Okay.
Because what I found is that the automaticity that we expect kids to have doesn't truly come until middle school content, right? The elementary years are all foundational things. But we also know that education in America has consistently produced poor outcomes for the kids that go to them. So the parents of the students that we serve are also byproducts of that same system. And I have to keep that in mind because I don't want them to be dissuaded from the work. I want them to engage. And so when you focus in on fluency work, it is literally the things that you can memorize and regurgitate. It doesn't require heavy amounts of knowledge or background knowledge. Literally, you just need an answer key. So my homework was structured that it was patterned to be the exact same every week. So I would give homework by the week. Every day was structured the exact same way every single day. There was always math fluency work where they would do, those like timed multiplication sheets.
Yes. 2 minute math.
Yeah, we do them for all operations. And the parents, there's a note on this sheet that talks about like there's not an expectation for your child to have all these done and have them all correct. We're looking for growth. So what we are looking for is that if your kid is only getting 5 right in August, and they should not just only be getting 5 right at the end of August, right? It's like because at school, like we would do those, and so what we would do is we would give those timesheets, but we would give them in patterns because we taught conceptually and we taught a lot of number sense at our school. So we would teach kids to identify the patterns when adding within a family. So if you're adding by 2s, you would figure out what the pattern is, which is like it repeats 2, 4, 6, 8, 0, and it repeats over and over again. So I can quickly go through and get my answers. That's the strategy that we're teaching at school. They're doing the practice of that at home. They do a timed practice multiplication or operation drill at school, but they were also doing them at home. And at home, the parent only needs to set up a 2-minute timer. Boom. When the kid's done, you tell them to put their pencil down. You write how many they got correct at the top. That's done. Move on to the next sheet. They had a word problem as well because we did number stories. And so they would have that. Then they would have sight words, and they would be expected to read at least 30 minutes a night and write it down in their log. That was the homework.
Okay.
And at first, the first month, parents was like, "Oh, okay, this homework, Mrs. Stanley." I was like, "Whoa, get used to it." And I was like, I would hold like conversations. I would address it in my newsletters. I was like, hold out, because again, the work that you're doing at home, kids are experiencing at school. And if you give it just a little bit more time, you will see that your kids need you less and less to do the work. Because it's not about them doing it accurately, it's about their attempt, right? And so we were looking at, because we talked a lot about being able to see student thinking. And we use manipulatives when we work. So again, the way that students were representing their work looked very foreign to parents. And that part I didn't want them to get bogged down on.
Right.
I didn't want them to see that their kid was making attempts at doing the work so that when we brought it back to school, we could get information about what they needed help on. Then by September, October, they're like, "Yeah, all right, Miss Darren, you're right. I can just give them a packet. They go, they do their thing. I can just check that it's done and it's good." And I was like, "See." And they're like, "You're not changing the homework, right?" Nope. It's like, it's been the same the whole time. Because again, my school was new. And so while folks were trying to trust me, they were still trying to make sure that the things I was saying, I was following through on. Right. That was a commitment that I made to them. I was like, this is what this is going to look like. And it's going to look the same. If it doesn't, you just let me know. And so that's what we did. We ran the same homework play the entire year. And that made it so that families could do that independently. they could teach other people how to get it done independently, and it just made it so that homework wasn't a chore.
Mm-hmm.
It was the kids' chore, but that's their work.
Right. That's their work. And that's so much, that mirrors so much of what teachers do in the classroom, because after about 6 weeks, maybe that first grading period, it's like automatic, even before then, I think I can get through halfway. And I tell parents, like, once you repeat it, the issue is repeating it, and I'm a person, I hate repeating myself. So I have found over the years how to make my teaching more efficient and being more efficient, because I'm like, oh, I don't like repeating myself. I don't like repeating myself. Okay, how can I find a way to let this hit home with them a lot faster? Because I will drive myself nuts. And you would think like, why are you a teacher? You don't like repeating yourself. That's between me and my God. Don't come for me.
Right.
I don't I don't like repeating myself though. But when my students know that, especially because I love middle schoolers, they tend to say, okay, I say, ask 3 before me. Y'all have too many friends. You ask them for everything else. You ask them, and then you come to me if you found 3 people in this class cannot help you with your situation. So that builds community, that lets them learn like, hey, everybody's, good at something different, and we need to appreciate everybody's differences in the classroom.
But that's also why you have to design. That's why student work time is actually designed like that in my school as a norm, right? Independent practice time is actually just that. It is, it's supposed to be independent practice, and so the majority of your students should be doing that work without your assistance.
Yes,
they should be relying on each other. And so, at my school, students were intentionally put in groupings because, all their work is done in groups until they're doing their exit ticket, which is an assessment. So the assessment is the only time you need to be alone. The rest of the time, collaboration. Because again, culturally, collaboration is how we learn and operate best. And so when you make that the culture of the space, then you can do that. And then you can even assign homework like that when you get older. So one of the theories that I'm working, once I get back into middle school world again, that I want to try out is that idea that you just talked about around community helping with homework. So instead of it being like in middle school, like, oh, my parent needs to help me, if everybody's working on the same thing, it is actually, we need to stop seeing that as cheating. You all need to figure out how you all got to the same answer.
Yes.
And figure out if your different pathways actually are a thing, because that becomes the conjecture to form math laws and properties, right? And that's that type of thinking is what I'm trying to do in shifting this work and how we do the work, is that the way that we've been programmed to think about these things is off. It's like, oh, like the kids working together, like they're cheating, they won't learn. No, it's actually fostering growth and learning.
Yes.
And it's doing it in a way amongst themselves, which is exactly what they're going to be expected to do as
in
college.
Yes. We have study hall together. Why are we not? And that's why sometimes it really irks me when I hear school districts have like this mission statement, we're preparing college and career ready students, and there are all these practices in place that's totally against that. We're not holding students accountable. We're not, for their work. We are not allowing collaboration. I'm like, you shouldn't be coming to me. This is I have my degree, and there's memes out there where we love saying that I have my degree. I need y'all to get this, but fostering that sense of, well, I know this person is a lot better at proofreading than me, because I tell my students, look, all of you all are not going to be able to do everything without a calculator, or you're not going to know how to spell words off the top of your head correctly, but you need to know who does, because as you go through your schooling, even if you don't plan on going to a 4-year college, you're going to have to be educated at some point for what you're going to do to be a successful adult. And you need to be able to collaborate with people. And like you said, that's not cheating. It's collaborating and knowing, okay, I contribute something, you contribute something, and we're all getting better as a whole. And I think, it really speaks to a larger societal issue when we're in siloed. We're kind of teaching them, oh, we got to be, no, we need to be together.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the banker, like that the Piaget model of education that we're under, the banker's model, where the adult at the front of the room is the all-knowing being, which is why we get bombarded with a million questions. Why they always, Mr. Stanley, Mrs. Stanley, Mrs. Stanley, like that used to drive me insane too. Everybody's want to ask me all these questions. And what had to shift was the redesign. And like culturally, we work better from a constructivist model, which means actually, if we have students working collaboratively on a problem together in a group, they will innately lean into their skill sets. And if they don't, your job as the adult is to be a facilitator, which means you ask questions to make them think. And then they use discussion to come up with conjectures and conclusions. And then you have discourse about what do people think and why. And that gets it rooted in evidence. And so when we start building those skill sets, that's what problem solving and critical thinking, that is actually how you build problem solving and critical thinking.
Yes.
If your classroom isn't designed in a space that it requires that kind of banter and back and forth with one another, then no, we're not building critical thinkers and problem solvers. Nope. We're building workers. And that's where we are as a society now. And so like, you know, the meme jokes, I oftentimes sit in a very weird place with educator jokes because I'm like, but these are also symptoms of a system that wasn't designed for us. And so things that we're making fun of are also things that we are inheriting that are problematic, that we could there are actually ways to do this that don't look like that. And so I find that I'm oftentimes like, people are like, oh, I struggle with parent investment. I'm like, I don't know that struggle. I'm struggling with attendance. I'm like, oh, I don't know that struggle. Right? It's like, I'm struggling with, you know, my teaching staff has been very diverse. And like, I've definitely had to let some folks go over time. But like, what I would stand on is that like, I've had teachers who, without having extreme backgrounds in education, have become high quality and performing teachers. Like, it is, and they're not, you know, while they may try to do things that like push against the envelope, like being late, as their school leader, I taught professionalism to my team and how to show up for me as their manager in a way that lessens strife and conflict. If you all don't want to deal with angry, rowdy, upset Mr. Stanley, then there's a way that you can do your job that makes that very clear and plain. And I'm going to teach it to you and show it to you so that we are not unclear about that. And I'm going to be consistent about how I enforce it. And so my team knew, it's like, he's looking at his office window at 7:44 to see who's walking in. And he's going to be down here before the huddle to have a conversation with you about why you're late. And so this idea of like, oh, so-and-so is just late to work all the time. Like, you don't get to build bad reputations in my school. Because you're going to mess up my culture for everyone else. And like, me showing up that way as a school leader was creating the environments for Black educators to thrive, where it's like, no, he's holding all of us to a high expectation in the performance. He's giving all of us feedback, and he's in all of our rooms, right? Like, he's doing these things, he's showing up in this kind of way. And it's not like, it's so easy to point fingers when you could just create solutions.
Yes. Yes, I appreciate that. Okay, so I want to say we, but you know, you view education as a pathway to liberation.
Yes.
So and this is one of our final questions. I want you to elaborate on that perspective and tell us how that influences you as a school leader, and how that influences you as a school leader.
Yeah, I didn't really understand the term liberatory education until I was doing school design work for the second time. When I gone to Mississippi, I was really just going off of the experiences that I had and just like things that I felt in my spirit and soul that I wanted to be right and true. And I didn't realize that there was work and research that was already supporting it. And so I was on the search to do the work again. I was like, I want to reason. What I didn't do in Mississippi first was connect with community. I kind of designed a school for them and then asked them to come be a part of it. And this time I didn't want to do that. Learning the context of St. Louis, there's a lot of harm that charters have done in that space. And I didn't want to contribute to that. And one of the ways was going in as a listener first. So it's like, I'm coming here because I want to design a school, but I want to get your voice on that before I do the design work. And so I started listening to parents in the city. And what became consistent was like, I want my kids set up for success in the future. I want them to be able to be independent in the future. So I want them to be able to have like financial security and like be self-sustaining and all those things. And so that was a part of it. And then historically, liberation has come through reading.
Yeah.
Enslavement lasted as long as it did because we didn't know how to read. And the early, again, I'm a little bit of a Ghodie Muhammad like Stan. As I used to be for Bell Hooks, so like I understand the love here because I still love Bell down too. But like Ghodie is my new fave, so she gets a lot of shine for me as of late. But in her text, she talks about the old literary societies that used to exist prior to the Jim Crow era, and how we would congregate to meet up. And learning to read was our act of resistance back then. And so folks were always finding ways and pathways to teach kids, to teach each other how to read. And then those literary societies were used the ability to read to then be able to read law and then go into court and plead your case to gain freedom. And I still see this world of oppression that we sit in, and the root cause of it being the fact that there's so many of us who don't read and who are not readers. And it's not just the ability to call words, because that's the skill that a lot of folks have. It is also about comprehension, the ability to analyze and grapple with text, and to argue with it, right? It is remembering that an author is just that. It is a person who is a human, who is doing this research. And so you want to take these perspectives, you want to take multiple perspectives and use those to help you form ideas and concepts and beliefs. And that is the way schools should be designed as well. And so to me, a school that is focused on liberation has to be focused on literacy and the various forms of literacy. And when I started the work, I wanted to focus on literacy, meaning how to read, digital literacy, meaning, how do I navigate the digital space? And that's even more pressing and important with IA coming into to play. And then financial literacy, because that was one, like every parent I talked to, every parent I talked to talked about the need for their children to have a better conceptual understanding of money, how they need to leverage it and use it as adults, and how they don't get exposure to that. And so part of my design was doing financial literacy starting in kindergarten, and having exposure with that throughout their K-12 experience. And so if students leave graduating school knowing how to grapple with the digital world, knowing how to grapple in finance, and they know how to read, there's nothing that can stop them. And that's what I think school should be. It shouldn't be about dictating whether or not kids go to college or the career they take. It's about creating the conditions for them to choose that wisely and intentionally. And whichever choice they decide, they feel adequately prepared for. So I always like to say, if a student decided to go to Harvard, Howard, or the military, we did our job.
Yes. Awesome. Okay, my last question for you. And this is it's a lot. My questions have multiple layers. They're like little onions that I give my guests. But what's your vision for education? And what are just some things some changes that you would like to see? And when I say changes you would like to see, I would say, in a kind of like a short time span, maybe not super long term, but what are some kind of short term changes you would like to see in education?
Work that I'm very interested in doing. I had alluded to the fact that I was trying to do founding work in St. Louis, and I actually did not open in St. Louis, and ended up pivoting back into the charter space under an existing organization. But while in this transition back into the organization, I was intentional about being placed in high schools because my career has been in elementary and middle. And to answer your question is around creating a mini replica of what I think the educational experience could look like pre-K 3 to 12 by reopening schools again and those in another city and leveraging it as a professional development space, particularly for Black educators. I am very concerned about the mass exodus of Black educators from the space, but I'm also very adamantly against bringing Black educators into unsafe spaces. And so I want to create safe spaces that model what it looks like to be a safe space for Black educators and bring in other, school operators to see and experience it, to ask questions, to receive professional development, to get consulting as necessary in order to replicate that in their spaces. But I think what I've seen to be true is that people don't believe things until they can see it. And so if there's a working model of an ecosystem that is healthy and thriving for Black and brown people, it is more believable that it's doable. And more people will lean in and say, if this is something that I can easily replicate, then teach me. I want to do this too. I don't know any school that is like, I want to do things that keep educators away, or I don't want to do things that make my space safer and better for all. And when you design for the people at the margins, everyone benefits. So if you create safe spaces for Black and brown people, every other demographic of people thrives as a benefit of that. And you see that's something that is also that you can start to see in data as well, because again, it's support and everybody needs it.
Awesome. Well, Mr. Stanley, thank you so much for your time. You already know I'm going to have you back. So I really hope that you can make some time for us again, because I've got even more questions for you. I've loved this conversation. So again, thank you so much for gracing us with your expertise and your experiences. And until next time, we'll talk again soon.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
That wraps up this episode of Pearls of Pedagogy. A huge thank you to Charles R. Stanley Jr. for sharing his incredible journey and invaluable insights into the world of charter schools and educational leadership. From pioneering new schools to setting records for student success, Charles's story is a testament to what's possible when passion and vision meet in the realm of education. If you found this episode inspiring, don't forget to subscribe to Pearls of Pedagogy on your favorite social media platform for updates and more educational content. Share your thoughts on today's show using the hashtag Pearls of Pedagogy. We'd love to hear how you're bringing innovation and leadership into your own educational journey. So stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll continue to explore the dynamic world of education with another incredible guest. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and remember, every pearl of wisdom you gather along your journey is a step toward transforming education. See y'all next time.